Welcome back. This time we're talking about Blade Runner 2049, a sequel to the 1982 sci-fi classic Blade Runner, directed by Ridley Scott and based on the novel by Philip K. Dick. Blade Runner is widely considered one of the seminal sci-fi films of all time, and for good reason. Even taking out the story itself and the movie itself as an entertaining 2 hours of cinema, the visuals and everything else about this movie has inspired so much of what we consider science fiction in the movies ever since. Whether it's action films like Total Recall or anime classics like Ghost in the Shell and its sequel, so much of what we have seen over the last 35 years in science fiction owes it to Blade Runner. So the idea of picking back up this story 35 years later is both fascinating and honestly terrifying. We got to see what happened when Ridley Scott himself got to retake the control of the Alien franchise with Prometheus and Alien Covenant. And I know there are some people who like those films. I'm not one of those. So there was an added trepidation going into this. My biggest hope for this film, however, was the fact that while Ridley Scott is producing this film, the man directing it is Denis Villeneuve, who has become one of my favorite directors working today. He gave us the terrifying Prisoners, the tension-filled Sicario, and my favorite film of 2016, the new science fiction classic Arrival. Original screenwriter Hampton Fancher is back, joined by Michael Green, and also returning is actor Harrison Ford, reprising his role as Rick Deckard. This story, which picks up 30 years after the end of the first film, revolves around a new generation replicant named K, played by Ryan Gosling, who is a Blade Runner working for the Los Angeles Police Department. He's someone who tracks down wayward replicants. There's an opening little, crawl that tells us after the events of Blade Runner and subsequent events involving rebellions of replicants, they were essentially banned for about a decade. And old school replicants from that era are now tracked down and eliminated, or as they put it, retired. A new company has since started making replicants again, one of which is K. And his latest assignment to track down a older generation replicant uncovers a 30-year-old secret and sends him off on this mission to find out answers to this decades-old mystery, and puts him in the crossfire of not only a rebellion-seeking group of replicants, but also a number of people in power who either want the secret contained or to use it to their own gain. Before I say anything else, let me say this film looks beautiful. The special effects are excellent. To the point that for the majority of the film, I stopped thinking of them as special effects. I actually think a lot of what is in this movie was done practically, and the fact that I'm not sure tells you just how much the special effects succeeded in what they were attempting to do. It also helps that Denis Villeneuve typically makes beautiful films. The cinematography, the camera angles, the backgrounds, the wide shots, the close-ups, everything about this movie is beautiful, even when it is grimy and dirty, which you would expect from a Blade Runner sequel. Now, the other thing that Villeneuve's films have in common is they typically have a measured, slower pace than a lot of films of this type have. And in that case, this film is relatively slow compared to what a lot of people might expect. It worked fine for me, but considering this film is nearly 3 hours long with a very measured pace, and honestly not a lot of action, less so than I was even expecting, I can see where some people are going to go, this movie was slow, not a lot happened. But that's not the point of a Blade Runner movie. I mean, Blade Runner had some cool action sequences, but it was about this idea of replicants, these manufactured humans, and how born humans are treating them, and considering them essentially slave labor. There was a lot of ideas that were being considered and explored in that movie around a sort of noir-esque police drama. Here we have a larger scale story. It goes further in this world, explores different avenues that this setting could set up, and where I really feel like if there's a big difference, if the original Blade Runner was diving into these philosophical debates and philosophical issues with these characters, this film, although it does that again and dives into new issues, this one, to me at least, feels like it is more concerned, or at least more concerned than the original film was, with the emotional impact of these debates. Kay's character, played excellently by Ryan Gosling, has a lot of emotion. There's a couple side arcs, one involving what is essentially his girlfriend, Joy, who I could see how that could just be cut. If you're looking for ways to trim the film, get it down to a more traditional length, yeah, you could probably cut that entire thing. But what we get from an emotional side, both from her character and the issues raised by her character, and the emotional impact of his relationship with her on Kay himself, would have made the film much less interesting, and just not as good. Frankly, just not as good. I really, really like this film. That being said, I can completely understand, and do understand, that this is not a film that is going to satisfy everyone who goes to see it. Some people are just not into a slower paced film such as this, and that's fine. But just know going in that that's what you're going to get with this one. So be prepared. For me, it worked perfectly, and honestly, as far as I'm concerned, this is the Blade Runner sequel that we've been waiting 35 years for. This is the sequel we deserved, and thankfully, it's the one that we got. It is not just an action, mindless, throwaway film, and it's not a movie that's trying to one-up everything that happened in the first film. What we get is a very thoughtful, measured, beautiful-looking exploration of the themes and debates that were raised in the first film, and taking those in a very logical direction as far as the next step. So if you were looking forward to this film, if you're a fan of the original film, I cannot recommend this enough. Go see it. Go see it on the big screen, and go see it on the biggest screen you possibly can, because it is, as I've said multiple times already, absolutely beautiful. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to you. What did you think of this film, if you've seen it? Did you enjoy it as much as I did? What were your favorite sort of arcs of the story? And really, do you think it is a worthy sequel to the original movie? As always, you can subscribe to my channel, check out some other reviews, and until next time, I'll see you at the movies.